Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's episode of the Pivotcast. I'm your host, Sarah the Pivoter. And here on the Pivotcast, I interview super rad humans from around the world doing rad things in all walks of life. This is a platform for you to share your voice and your story so that we can bring value to the listeners from around the world. I'm really stoked to be here with you guys today. I'm coming at you from Lockhart, Texas, which is very close to Austin. And we're going to hear some super rad ideas from today's guest, Anessa. She's going to give us the down low on some super simple steps for rocking your change journey. And you guys know I'm all about that, so that you can bring real, lasting change to not only your clients' lives, but your own as well, through words, intimacy, and process. So without further ado, I will bring Anessa on. Hi, Anessa. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for the invite. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anessa and I met through social media, through some of the networking groups that we're in. And we talked about doing this live together for a little while. And because of the work that we both do and how we help our clients, we thought this would be the perfect topic, especially when it comes to change. One, it's not always easy. And two, sometimes the change doesn't stick because we don't go down deep enough. And I see we've got some LinkedIn users giving some big kudos to Anessa and watching us live. So thank you for being here with us. So Anessa has 15 years in bringing change through multi-million-dollar projects and 10 years as a weight loss accountability coach and entrepreneur. She is hell-bent to teach female service entrepreneurs on how to bring real change to their own lives and their clients, as I said before, through words, intimacy, and process. So we're going to be talking about the relationship between thoughts, emotions, and actions, and unpack how the connections can either prepare us for change or hold us back. So I hope you guys have your pens and papers or your iPads ready and to take some notes, because we've got a really great live coming at you today. So Anessa, thank you again for being here. How did you come up with this topic? What was it in your own life that allowed you to see what these issues were from a systemic point of view?
Initially, I had my own traumas to work through before I became a consultant. And I went through the entire process of kind of unraveling their beginnings and how it was impacting my change journey. Then I became an integration consultant in a Fortune 500 corporate engine of the world. And I realized that change is difficult for many people. Most of us have had some sort of trauma. And I realized that whether change is being imposed on you or whether you're embracing it, the process of really getting to the root of why you're thinking about change and the emotions associated with that is really important. So after 15 years of helping people embrace change that was being imposed upon them by their organizations, I opened my own business and started working with female executives who were actually embracing change. And after all the 25 years of doing this, I've come to some really important conclusions about what holds us back, what we really need, and how we can support each other if bringing change is part of our mission.
I love that. And I also love that you highlighted what we need and how we can support each other, because I think very often we use the mind to go after what we think we want, but we really neglect the needs aspect of it. And so that's why it's surface level only, because we don't understand that deeper root cause that's driving us towards the change in the first place, and also supporting each other, because we simply can't do this alone, can we?
No, we can't. And we talk about staying curious about ourselves and about these journeys that we're all on, because we're all changing in some way. But staying curious about that long enough and really sitting with it for a while can really be revolutionary in you kind of unpacking why you're not moving through change the way that you think you should be.
Yeah, I love that. So you mentioned that you had gone through some of your own traumas and kind of healing, peeling back the layers and going through that. But it sounds like it wasn't just a one step, now it's done process. So for those out there that are listening that might be at the beginning of their journey, could you help highlight some of the things that you went to at the very beginning?
Sure, I'd love to do that. One of the things that I went to at the very beginning is just understanding for me and for you that change is a long path and that it's composed of lots of little steps. And the important thing is just moving very slowly but gradually in each of those steps. So small, really incremental progress goes a long way. The other thing that I
Mm.
realized is that change is a very personal experience. You might be part of a program or part of an organization, a part of a course, and you're all headed toward the same destination, but your personal experience will be unlike any others that are on that journey. So I think we kind of compare and contrast ourselves sometimes, and we say, well, so and so is moving ahead faster than I am, or this person's able to adapt more quickly or learn this more quickly than I have. And we start comparing. But I think what's important for us to realize, and what was important for me to realize, is that there's only one me. And how I move through change is really unique to my head and my heart and my connection with the context that I'm working in.
Yes, I love that, because what might work for you today will not necessarily work for someone next to you, even if they're very similar in personality, similar circumstance, same job industry. But what also works for you today may not work for you tomorrow. Right. And so bringing in that compassion and understanding that, as you say, things are always changing is really important, I found as well.
It really
It
is
brings to
super
mind
important.
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's super important, to realize that not only is your change journey unique to you, but any trauma that you've had, whether it was major, whether it's been minor, that impacts your ability to evaluate your readiness for change. And it also impacts your ability to stick with things. And you talk a lot about behaviors. We talk a lot about different kinds of communication styles and different kinds of personalities. And that's a whole nother podcast, right? When we talk about
Yeah.
the different ways we approach change, it's very unique to our behavioral needs and our styles. And I just want people to know that are in your audience or listening to this, you're unique, and your experience with this is based on your prior knowledge of things and how you interpret events around you.
I love that. And the ability of how we interpret events around us can also change, right? We have the power to rewrite those old narratives that we might be stuck in, that have been holding us back. There's a very common example, I'm sure you come up with it in your female entrepreneurs, is that they want more clients, but yet maybe they don't want more clients because they're afraid of the delivery, or they're afraid that it's more work. So understanding both sides of our wants and desires, how does it serve us, how does it limit us, is really important as well. And we get the choice, we have the power to choose how we're going to rewrite that narrative, and then learn how do we self-soothe that resistance that we face. And once we put the flashlight on there, we can't unsee it, right? And then we have more information, more data to take action.
Yes, and I think you're right. And I think that when we look at change, there's three things that I really want to kind of narrow in on today, because I want your audience to be able to walk away with some really helpful and valuable information. And I think one of
Amazing.
those things to really understand is that behaviors and actions that you take are driven by your emotions,
Mm.
but your emotions are driven by thoughts. And some of those thoughts may have been with you for many, many years, and they may be
Mm.
living in the part of the brain, the lizard part of the brain, that's kind of
Mhm.
imprinted that thought. I
Right.
think one of the challenges that we have is that we think that when we can identify our triggers, which is what you're referring to, right? What are the things I need
Mhm.
to reframe? When we identify them, we often think that they're going to just magically go away. But we have to shine a light on them. We have to acknowledge them. We sort of have to dig through them like gardening soil to figure out what's the
Mm.
source of that thought. Is it something someone
Yeah.
said to you 25 years ago? And that it
Right.
meant so much to you at the moment because they had so much influence over you that you just imprinted it and you've accepted it and have forgotten that that was said? This may be something that you don't even remember someone saying to you. So I always talk to people
Right.
about, if you have a goal and you don't find that your actions are in alignment with that goal, get in touch with how you're feeling. Like, name the emotion that you're feeling. Acknowledge what that really is. And then sit down with a cup of tea and a pen and paper and ask yourself, where did this feeling originate from?
Mm.
You'll find many times it originated because someone said or didn't say something at a really pivotal time in your life, and it became
Mm.
imprinted on you like a pattern on a wallpaper. And
Mm.
because of that, you haven't reflected back far enough to figure out where that really began. So we have to get there, right? We have to name what we're feeling and really sit in it for a minute. Is it fear? What's the source emotion? Is it overwhelm, which is often based in fear? What is it? And just acknowledge it. And then we have to sit there and ask ourselves, why am I feeling this way? What is the thought that's driving this energy? Because thoughts do drive emotions, and emotions determine our actions.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. It reminds me of this article I read that came out of the New York Times. This was a couple of years ago, and this journalist had gone to contact all of the bullies that she had had in middle school and high school, and document her experience in doing that. And some of them were really resistant to reconnect, of course, because they knew they hadn't treated her so well. But when she was able to connect with them, she was able to find out what their story was, and that this girl who teased her and was mean to her was being beaten at home by her parents, and just really getting some different context, so she was able to rewrite this story. But it put me on this journey of, when did I stop doing X, or when did I start doing Y as a response to something that happened to me? And it was really enlightening. It really highlighted how these certain behaviors that, at the time protected me from that age, and it kept me feeling safe, but is no longer serving me and is actually limiting me. And so it's a really powerful exercise to do this. And it might take a few rounds, and that's okay too.
It is okay because for me, it's like polishing a rock. You're going to pick up your
Mm.
polish, you're going to pick up your rock, and you're just going to gradually over time get better at that. But the beauty is that once you know the thought behind a particular emotion in a certain context, um, every time that feeling arises, you get to check in with yourself and say, I know where you're coming from. I know
Yeah.
because I've acknowledged it. I've seen it. I've put a light on it. This isn't a surprise to me how I'm feeling. I know why I'm feeling this way. But then we get half choice. What are we going to do, as you say, to reframe it? And what I call to validate or unvalidate it. Many of the things that we took on as a thought served a purpose, like the reason the example you just provided. Many times, some of the information that gets imprinted on our amygdala, on our lizard brain, is really just some comment that someone said, really what they thought out of kindness, but was detrimental. And so when you
Right.
start to identify where the source thought is, then you have to begin to validate, you know, was this really the truth? Does this really matter anymore to me? Why did it matter so
Mm.
much then? And you get to really pull those threads. And so many times I find that at the end of the day, you don't really care anymore what that person thought about you because you've moved
Right.
on. But the thought driving that emotion that's maybe holding back your actions, it's keeping you from forming the
Yeah.
habits that you want to achieve your goal, is rooted there in that soil.
Yes, and as you say, it's rooted there, and that might be the 5-year-old self or the 15-year-old self or 25-year-old self that's driving the show and reacting as if this was the scenario, whereas your current self, your adult self, knows rationally and logically that's not what it wants to do anymore, but it hasn't soothed and addressed the previous experience. And often when those things happen, we kind of becomes scattered, right? There's pieces of us that kind of break away. We put it in a little box and we go, okay, that's going to go on the shelf and I'm not going to touch it because it's scary or it's painful or it's sad. And then we end up really just being fragmented versions of ourselves. And when we go back and start to reintegrate these, it might be a little bit uncomfortable because you haven't looked at it for so long, but that's the process to healing, as you say. And that's also the process to being able to move forward. And as I really liked what you said, was with the power to choose how you're going to change your actions. And I read in Sadhguru's Inner Engineering, he defines responsibility as response and ability. So it's really just
Mm.
your ability to respond. And I really loved that reframe because we often think of responsibility as like an obligation. But really, when we have the responsibility for our own options, we're acting out of sovereignty. We're making our own decisions, which is a very powerful place to act from. And the more responsibility we have, the more we can handle, the more situations we can navigate as we go through the many changes in our life that we will encounter.
Certainly. And if you think back, even just in your own life and in your listener's life, you think back to a time when someone was highly influential in your life and they said
Mm.
something that is still with you. And sometimes those things are beautiful and you never do want to forget them because they brought you back to who you are. Sometimes there are
Yeah.
things that it'd be better if you did reframe and you did question and attempt to validate, right? And so I think that when we have an opportunity to reflect back, we take control of our destiny.
Mm.
It's a process of shining that stone and looking back at the thoughts that are driving these emotions, but then you get to drive the bus. No one else is driving it. Something someone said 10 years ago isn't determining whether you can reach your new career goal, find your new job, start your new business. A lot of times we find, I work so much with entrepreneurs, right? And a lot of times I find even in their programs that they're offering to women primarily, they struggle to help women move through change. And it's
Mm.
because we often don't go to this root source and realize that if we can mine there, we can take
Mm.
control over the choice that we're going to make when we're trying to shift to a new job, to a new
Yeah.
lifestyle, maybe to a new relationship. But we have to do the work really to look at where those things are originating from, where those emotions are coming from, because they're driving our interpretation of events around us now.
Yeah. I love the analogies you're using with like mining and then the polishing of the rock because it brings to mind for me these like gems, right? And gemstones are found hidden in the earth. And when you first find them, they might be kind of ugly and misshapen, and you don't really, maybe you won't even recognize it. But then you get out that polishing rag or and you're like washing it and you're cleaning it and you're shining it. And then over time that gleam comes out and you're like, whoa, look at this thing that I have, right? And it's priceless and it's valuable. And we all have those, it's just there in the dirt. And just, I use gardens a lot as well. And so when you plant a seed, that seed has to push up, it has to break the seed open and come up through the soil, and then it can be in the sunlight and grow into something that bears flowers or fruit. But in the beginning, that process is not always so clear, and so it might feel like you're stuck in the mud a little bit. But if you consistently keep going, then that's where we can have that magic and that transformation.
Yeah, and I think you do such a great job of, you're always talking to people about small steps. And I think when
Mm.
we're in a transformation cycle, we're always looking at the end. We're like, well, we're trying to get to point B. Here's the destination. But instead, what we kind of need to reframe is, what is the small step I need to take today that's going to put me on that trajectory? And it may be
Yeah.
very small. When I worked with weight loss and accountability clients, some of those steps for some people were very small. It wasn't, hey, here's your new food plan. Let's work out 7 days a week. For some people, it was like, let's put on our tennis shoes. And then in a couple
Yeah.
days, maybe let's think about a walk. And in a couple more days, let's think about walking a little further. So when we look at transformational change, a way to build momentum in yourself right, is to take small little bites out of your transformational journey so that you're charged, you're building your self confidence. Don't put something huge in front of yourself and say, why can't I do this? Put something
Right.
small in front of yourself, just kill it and relish in the wonderful confidence that comes from killing it, and then do the next little thing. Because our goal with our
And
clients and
celebrate.
with our ladies, right, is to celebrate these
Yes.
little, really pivotal wins, because that's where self confidence begins to get built.
Mm, yes, absolutely. And the celebrating the wins, like some people might think, oh, all I did was go for a walk today. Why do I need to celebrate that? But as we start to recalibrate ourselves for celebrating the wins, we turn the dial from all the things we still have to do to recognizing all the things that we've had done. So many people in the corporate world, traditional kind of project management, there's a checklist and you feel that satisfaction when something comes off the checklist. But sometimes the tasks that are there are not broken down enough. So actually, in order to check it off, you need to do 10 things. And so because of that, you don't start it. And then it's always there. And it's like every day just keeps ticking over and ticking over. And there's this mad rush at the end, right? I'm sure you've experienced this, especially in the corporate world. So we've become very good at setting goals and looking at where we want to go, but we don't stop to realign and say, hey, are we actually on track? What's going on? There's no finger on the pulse. And if we start to celebrate the wins, we get that. And we also can start to, I like to say, going from 99.7 to 99.8. We go from static to clarity. All we needed to do was turn that dial just a little bit, and all of a sudden we're getting that feeling of, wow, we're making progress. And at the end of the day, that's your measure of success, right? Progress is the true measure, not the outcome. I like that you brought that up, because I think that's a really important thing, that whether you're an entrepreneur, in corporate, a stay-at-home parent, still in school, that is something we really need to get away from, is that the outcome is the end all be all.
Yeah, and I think that so much of the constructs, society, education, all the systems around us force us to think that that's the only way to define success. You have a certain title, you've made a certain amount of money, you've traveled to a certain amount of countries, whatever that is. Society's got its own constructs, and those kind of pressure us to think that we have to step into that. But what I've always told my clients, and I'm sure this resonates with much of what you say to yours, is step into your own construct. What you need
Yeah.
is unique to you. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about it. And often we have this decision that we want to pursue a goal, but we may not
Mhm.
really be internally wired anyway to reach that goal. We may need a lot of help thinking about how to get there, because a lot of people are not goal oriented. You and I are. We're very goal
Yeah.
focused. When we look at your book and the way that you talk and the language that you use, we're very kind of, hey, we're moving ahead. But a lot of people we get to work with are not of that mindset. And so we have to be able to meet them where they're at. And I want your viewers to realize, again, like I started at the top of the hour, change is a very personal thing. And how you're hardwired in certain contexts really impacts your needs to move through that. Some of us are more problem focused, and we have to work from the problem to the solution. And some of us are a lot more solutions focused, where we just take a bunch of steps and we keep charging toward that. But we're all different.
Yeah. And as you mentioned before, the context may also change how you behave, right? If it's something that's family related, in the workplace, or maybe, a decade from now, the way that you handle a problem most likely won't be the same way that you handle the problem now, right? And depending on so many different factors. So I think the point here is really to have compassion for yourself when you change, right? Just because you started out with a certain goal or a certain mindset does not mean you have to be that way forever, right? For example, I have one of the coaches I'm working with. He became vegan for a period of time. Then he did the carnivore diet for a period of time, and he highlighted the pros and cons of both and his experience. But it was Not that he chose to be vegan forever or carnivore forever, but it was an experiment. And so that's what you can really think of it is this is the experiment of life, right? And the more actions you take, the more data you're going to get. And what you do with that data is up to you. It just helps you to validate something. Does it work for you? Or invalidate, oh, this doesn't feel so great anymore. But if you don't do anything, that's when you get trapped in the cycle of anxiety in your mind, and you find yourself really stuck. So Anessa, I know you mentioned that you've got a strategy and 3 steps to really helping rock this change journey so that people learn how to kill it. So can you walk us through what that is?
Yeah, and so I kind of alluded to them a bit earlier, but the first thing really that you need to do in a quiet space, right, is sit down and get in touch with what it is that you're feeling. We have a hard time doing
Mm,
that because we're so distracted. So it's really important to sit down with it. And that could be a really great emotion, or it could be a really struggling kind of negative emotion. But it's important that you actually sit with it and figure out what it is that you're feeling. And I like to write mine down. Right now, I am feeling scared that I can't do this
mm,
podcast well, whatever's in front of you that you're dealing with. Name it and write it down. And then you're going to have to sit down and go through a journey to understand by asking yourself a series of questions. Where did this emotion originate from? What thought in me is driving it? And you may not get this answer that day. You may have to come back to that piece of paper after you think about it in the evening and some more the next day. But it's important that you go back to source and find out where that thought originated from. So for
yeah.
me, when I first went through this process, it took me like 3 days to get to where the self-worth issues were lodged, like where they began. And it took me 3 days, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is redonkulous. Why can't I get to the point? So it may take you a while. It took me a while. It's okay.
Yeah.
Keep asking yourself and being curious about its origin. Once you've done that, you need to write about it. Get it on a piece of paper and work with your subconscious mind to get that out in front of you. Another form of acknowledgement. I remember when someone said this to me. I remember when this happened. I remember who and why it happened. Okay. Jot down anything you can remember about where that thought was planted. Then the third thing is to walk through this reframing, as you call it, or this validation. Why did I accept this? Does this person's opinion really matter to me? Why did it matter then, but it doesn't matter now? And what am I going to do about it going forward? Because you get to reframe it. And if you've rendered it invalid, that their opinion really didn't matter now, it might have mattered then every time that trigger jumps up for you, you can say, I remember why I feel this way. It's because on my lizard brain, I have this imprinted memory of someone saying something to me that makes me struggle with self-worth and identity. And so you catch yourself before you act again, before you react. You develop a plan for looking at that trigger the second that it pops up, because you know where it came from. You can choose
Yeah.
to act differently. And if you're trying to form new habits and skills, you can make a new choice.
Hmm. I love that. I like to talk about this with people as well, in the concept of when we're reacting, right? When we have a trigger, then we're repeating an action. When you break the word down, that's literally what it means. Re is to do something again, and act, right? Action is to do something. So you're repeating something that you've done in the past. Whereas when you consciously choose to respond, then you're acting from a place of knowledge, from power, and authenticity. And as you said, it may not be so easy the first time. Maybe it takes you, 10 minutes after the trigger before you go, oh, wait a second, I can choose now. This is not how I'm going to behave, or, I'm going to change my story. After you practice, it's like going to the gym. The first time you walk in that gym, maybe it's just putting your tennis shoes on. Maybe it's just, going on the treadmill, walking at a slow pace. Maybe you're picking up the 1 pound dumbbells, right? You don't go in there and deadlift 100 kilos the first time you go. So it's
Right.
going to be this slow, gradual process. And then it gets easier and easier. And then you'll be in a state where, you're taking care of yourself. These things happen. And before you even take an action, you'll go through a process internally to change how you behave. And it won't even be a conscious thing, it'll just be your new behavior. So that's a really beautiful thing. I love these steps, and I put them on the screen so people watching back the video as well will be able to see them.
Yeah, and you
Amazing.
you approach change with your clients with many of the same approaches, but I think having these steps and what you're talking about, hitting the pause button before you decide how you're going to react to it is a wonderful way to come up with a new strategy to move forward. What's the new thing I want to do? What's the new action I want to
Yeah.
take? Because you've already decided the other one isn't working for you. Um, and I think, one thing I can say is that after working with people through change for most of my life, I think that it's a really beautiful journey to be on with someone. And it has to start with compassion for yourself. When you love yourself
Yes.
enough and you're willing to make this investment in time and energy, you don't just impact your life, you impact every role that you serve in with other women, in your job,
Mhm.
at work. It impacts everything you do and everywhere you go. So it has this huge ripple effect. So in serving yourself and investing in yourself, you're investing in every role that you fill.
Absolutely. And the ROI is going to be what you put into it. And most of us think that we have to do all these external things in order to validate, that we deserve something or that we're worthy. When we have that inherent worth already, it is really a byproduct of capitalism and the industrial era that, we had to produce to have value. And so that's starting to change with the way that our economies are changing, society is changing, right? The way that work is evolving, especially as we have more things online and digital and going back to how do we live in harmony with nature. But that investment into yourself will always be something that you get to carry and you get to drive, right? You get to choose if you buy something that's 999 or 999 or 9,000, right? You get to choose what you're going to get out of it because you are putting in that work and effort. And so many people, for example, they go and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on education with no guarantee that there's a job at the end necessarily, right? Yes, okay, maybe if it's Ivy League or this or that, there's some kind of built in, oh, yes, people want me from this school. But there's still no guarantee. I mean, look at all the people who graduated in the time of COVID or the time of the global financial crisis, right? All those guarantees went out the window. And yet they were willing to invest huge amounts in doing something that when they graduate, some of that information is already obsolete. So, how can you take that power back into your own hands and really drive this from what you need, getting that clarity and making it work for you? Adopting what's going to work for you because you know it will and it feels right, rather than someone standing up there saying, this is the way you have to do it and this is the only way. Wake up at 4 a.m. and do XYZ, and then that's your path to success, because that's not everybody's path.
No, you're 100% right. And after writing a book about change yourself and working with women for so many years, and also in your corporate background, we have enough experience under our belt that we can look at women and say, you know what? There's nobody like you in the whole world. So
Yeah.
don't try to fit into a puzzle that somebody else built. You don't have
Yeah.
to. You're your own
You
puzzle.
don't
You
have
get to
to.
be your own piece. No, you don't have to step
Exactly.
into that puzzle, but we're so pressured to do that, right? We're pressured to be a certain kind of mom or a certain kind of entrepreneur or make a certain amount of money or have a certain status. But at the end of the day, if you have goals that you want to reach, then your only point of service is to serve yourself and to meet yourself where
Exactly.
you're at in that moment.
Beautiful. Because when you serve yourself, you can better serve others. As you said, that ripple effect. You can't pour from an empty cup. And for Those of you in aviation out there, if you remember what it's like to be on an airplane, what do they tell you when those oxygen masks come down? They tell you, put your own one on first before you help others, because you're no good to other people if you're passed out from no oxygen, right? And it's the same thing in day-to-day life. If you're malnourished, if you're not getting the self-care, you simply cannot be the best mother or father or parent, boss, colleague, sister, daughter, friend, all of the above. So it's really about learning how to make sure that you're in the best position so that you can have that ripple effect and serve others in the best way possible. I think, especially at this time with everything that's going on in the world, we have a lot of change, a lot of uncertainty, and it's this crumbling of old structures, this crumbling of old paradigms. And so we get a choice. How will we respond to that? And how will we make sure that we take the right actions for us, for ourselves, for our families, and inspire those behind us, the generations behind us, to also continue to evolve and make conscious choices rather than just react because of certain old paradigms or power constructs, stories that we have.
Yeah, and I think that you make so many good points there. And I think the other thing I'd add before we close is really to just embrace the people around you who are solely aligned with you being the best version of yourself. I think sometimes we surround ourselves with people for different reasons, but if you're on a change journey and you're trying to change a career, change a relationship, change your perception about yourself, whatever it is you're trying to move toward, surrounding yourself with people who are just willing to be with you in that space and don't expect anything from you, but are willing to embrace it with you is really important. I just finished a whole bunch of market research of which you were a part. And what I found is that so many people are just really feeling, no matter how successful they are, that it's still not enough. And we need more
Mhm.
support. And women in particular, who fill most coaching programs and most professional development programs, we need to step up and support each other by sharing what we know works.
Mm, yes, I agree. As we share as well, that pie grows and we all get more, right? It's not a zero-sum game. It's not
No.
this scarcity of, oh, if you get that, then I miss out. I like to use the analogy of a donut. When you have a donut, what's your reaction? You go, oh, amazing, donut's a treat, right? You don't look at the whole and go, oh, there's a piece missing.
Right.
Man, that's shitty. Right? You look at the donut and you're excited. So
Right.
this is what we want for all of you listening out there. So Anessa, thank you so much for being here. I've loved this conversation. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Facebook. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I'm readily available at either platform. So just reach out to me and know that if you have a question or you just need someone to bounce some things off with, I'm always available.
Perfect. Well, all of this live will be posted on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and you'll be tagged in them as well. So for our listeners, you can very easily find Anessa there. So thank you so much, Anessa, for being here with us today. And for those of you watching, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us live, or if you're watching the replay. We would love for you to take a moment to really comment and share your biggest takeaway, what you really loved from today's lessons. And just remember, real pivoters are human beings just like me and you. And all it takes is the choice to do something different. So go out and choose something that's going to make you sparkle today and keep on keeping on. Thank you very much. We'll see you guys soon.